Hello, and welcome to my Modlist showcase, where I give an overview and opinion on mod lists to help find the right one for you. This time we are looking at the Phoenix Flavour by Phoenix and Umgak, released for Skyrim Special Edition. The version I've been playing on is version 4.6.1, released on the 29th of June 2021, and you can check on the Phoenix Flavour Discord linked below for any changes and updates. Firstly, what is the Phoenix Flavour? The description reads, the Phoenix Flavour for Skyrim SE is a Vanilla Plus modding guide and mod list, featuring over 600 mods carefully selected and patched for a coherent and stable experience. Originally released in 2017, it has gone through many iterations and continues to be updated and expanded frequently. The idea of Vanilla Plus will be mentioned a lot during this showcase, because it really does describe the list perfectly. It simply refers to it still feeling like the base game of Skyrim, but with enhancements to all its aspects. The Phoenix Flavour is available to download from the Wabberjack Modlist installer. While I won't cover the specifics of the installation in this video, the installation was incredibly easy, with clear instructions on the Modlist installation webpage. This mod list is one of the largest of all Skyrim's lists on Wabberjack. Because of this, the download did take me a long while, with the mods and Skyrim install totaling to around 160 GB. Although I don't have very good internet myself, so it's just one of those things that will vary from person to person. There's also a couple of files you have to move about at the end of the download, but it didn't take long and it's all explained in the installation guide. Once in game, setting up the specific mod configurations is very easy, again with clear instructions provided. Now for what the mod list adds. For this showcase I'll be showing clips taken throughout my current playthrough. I've spent plenty of time with this list, so I have a good grasp on what it's like to play. Despite graphics not being the primary focus of this mod list, I was taken back by just how good this list looks. It really sticks to the idea of Vanilla Plus, where it hasn't added a bunch of new objects and scenery, but instead everything now has an updated high resolution texture, and many things like the trees have better looking models that feel less flat than the base game. The choice of weather mod is Cathedral Weathers, which really works well with the cold northern colour palette of Skyrim. It is worth noting that the lighting is very natural, in that if you go in a cave that logically would be very dark, it probably will be very dark, so do make sure to bring a torch along with you. Not only was I taken back by how good it looks, but also how well it performs. I managed to hold around 60 FPS for most of the time, even in dense forests. My specs are here on screen, and while I know it's very high end and might not be useful for a lot of people, I was running at 1440p ultra wide, so I would expect the same performance as I'm getting on say a GTX 1080 at 1080p. Another thing worth noting is that there's an option provided to lock the game's frame rate at above 60 FPS, without having all the physics break as it usually does. This seems to work fine for most people, but for some reason I was getting really stuttery mouse movements, so I had to lock it at 60. It's nothing to do with the list, it's just Skyrim being its usual janky self, so it is worth locking it at 60 if you have the same problem. Rather than adding a bunch of new features, the Phoenix Flavour aims to improve upon all the mechanics that comes with Skyrim. Very early in my playthrough, I noticed how much it felt like I was playing a more modern version of Skyrim, as if Bethesda had released it today and it came with all the convenient and better feeling gameplay tweaks that are expected in games nowadays. Lots of little things like putting saddlebags on horses and new crafting recipes for smithing that make more sense may not sound that exciting, but with so many mods, it really does add up and make the game feel much more nicer to play. The mod open world loot affects the loot you'll find in the world. It's not likely you'll find really good loot early on, but it goes by the main idea that if you go into an area with difficult enemies, at the end you'll be more likely to find better loot. An area of gameplay that does have a big noticeable change is the levelling and perk system. The speed at which you level up is adjusted at specific points, most notably between level 10 and 30, where levelling up slows down a considerable amount. To counter this, you're given more perk points than usual as you level up. This may sound overpowered, but the perk overhaul mod Adamant not only adds a few new perks, but tweaks Skyrim's existing perks to make them much more balanced and more fun. As a final note, this mod list doesn't add anything for survival like hunger or camping, although I will touch upon that later in the add-ons section. The combat in the Phoenix Flavour feels like a more difficult version of Skyrim's base combat, where at first I thought it felt like hardly anything had changed. After a few fights I realised there's a lot of new tweaks, which mean I have to think and prepare before a fight. The primary combat mod used is Blade and Blunt. Some of the more important changes are as follows. With your weapon drawn, your character moves much slower now. Also, stamina drains quicker, with no stamina regen while attacking, plus debuffs when your stamina reaches 0. To balance this, attacking an enemy when they can't block, such as when they're about to power attack, will now deal 50% more damage. This means the combat is more about waiting for the right time to attack, rather than blindly swinging like in vanilla. Also, depending on the difficulty you play on, enemies will now deal a lot more damage to you, and you will deal a lot less to them. This is more subjective, as it doesn't make enemies too spongy, but it does mean fights can last a while, whereas personally I'm someone who prefers both me and the enemies to have high damage outputs so fights end quickly. It's also worth noting that the magic overhaul mod Mysticism has been added, which adds over 200 new spells and more vendors selling expert spells. This adds a massive amount of variety to mage builds, and I recommend you look at the mod page if you want to find out what spells have been added. Overall, the combat doesn't feel incredibly different like in some mod lists, but it has enough tweaks to make it better than the mindless swinging of vanilla Skyrim. Plus a large number of new viable combat playstyles keep things fresh and enjoyable. With the idea of Vanilla Plus in mind, this mod list doesn't add any large new quests or new lands. It does, however, continue the trend of improving upon the base game. Many of the quests already in the game have had changes to improve them, mainly with more dialogue options to improve roleplay. I won't spoil the new quest options, but as an example, you can now choose to lie to Lucan about finding the Golden Claw at the start of the game. Plus there are a number of smaller quests added, like Radiant quests, which aren't exactly story heavy, but give the player something to do, especially when leveling a new character. There has been a couple new landmarks added into the world, but nothing world changing, and all fit within the lore. For example, a new lighthouse has been added on the coast, which of course makes sense and fits right into the scenery. The audio has been improved to make the game much more atmospheric, with large audio mod bundles that really make the environment come alive. I think this is a category you just best hear for yourself. The Phoenix Flavour doesn't include any large new weapon or armour mods, which for me at the start was a big turn-off. However, continuing with the idea of Vanilla Plus, many of the weapons in the game have been improved upon, both in how they look and how they feel to use. Each weapon type felt very different from each other, making the inclusion of no new weapons to be much less of a problem than I was anticipating. And the new armour textures have been all well chosen, to the point of some feeling like brand new armour mods. Plus I have come across a new armour found on a new enemy type, so there are some to find out there integrated into the world. So while I did miss the variety you find in other mod lists, honestly I didn't find the lack of new weapons and armours to be that much of a problem. Aside from this, there have been a few new miscellaneous items added to the world, such as ingredients and crafting materials. As some extra points to talk about, the character creator menu is much more in depth than before, with new hairs, eyes, hair colours and such. The mod Trade and Barter has made trading much more interesting, such as different prices depending on race and region. And finally, the HUD is much more cleaner and easy to use, plus there's a guide on the Phoenix Flavour website for making it ultra-wide compatible. Now for some additions to the list I have personally made, but first I must stress, any changes you make to the list has nothing to do with the mod list author. You should only do so if you have an understanding of modding and accept that any consequences are yours to deal with. Although with this in mind, unlike most mod lists, the Phoenix Flavour website does have a page about add-ons, although be sure to read the page fully before installing any. The first mod I installed was Quick Loot, which adds the same looting system as Fallout 4, where a small window pops up when you loot a lootable object, instead of having to go into the loot menu that pauses the game world every time. If you enjoy survival mods like me, I'd look into using Frostbite, which is rather simple but it gives all the basics you'd want in a survival weather mod. And for food and hunger mods, I'd recommend trying Vitality mode, which again is rather basic, but it gives all the hunger properties you would want. I've not used either of these, so I can't say if they work for sure, but they're usually a safe bet for lightweight survival mods. Finally with add-ons, it's common to want to add new weapons and armours. While I didn't add any myself, from what I've seen, apparently there are potential conflicts and problems it could cause, so I definitely recommend doing your research and finding out if there are any patches for mods before installing any. Overall, I think the Phoenix Flavour is an incredibly well-made list that will appeal to a lot of people, but especially those who are newer to modding or mod lists. I know we got a Skyrim special edition a few years ago, but if there was ever an Ultimate Edition or Director's Cut, I'd want it to be the Phoenix Flavour. It just perfectly strikes the balance of feeling like Skyrim, but everything just looks and plays so much better. Before playing this, I was always adamant that people who play Skyrim for the first time should have no or very minimal mods installed, but honestly I think this mod list would be perfect for a first time player. If you're someone who's played through Skyrim a bunch, into survival, or really wanting something fresh and unique from the game, this likely isn't the list for you. But if you're newer to the game, new to modding, or want a modded experience that doesn't take away from the core look and feel of vanilla Skyrim, then this is definitely the list for you. It really is the safest bet if you're looking for a new mod list, and despite preferring the more hardcore survival side of Skyrim mods, I really did have a blast with this list. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like as it helps the channel grow. And if you have any lists you'd want me to cover, please feel free to tell me in the comments. I also have a Twitch where I tend to play more relaxing games, but I might start streaming my playtesting of these lists. Other than that, thank you to Christian Howell for being my sole Patreon supporter. You're running the channel here. Thank you everyone, and farewell.
My Eorland is the finest blacksmith in Skyrim, and that's not just a wife's boasting.